Okay, so it looks like we are recording now. So this is now the September 2018 community call for development community call for share. Cam just volunteered to be the note taker, so we're just rolling on through. Folks are filling in as being here on the call. So today, I think we have kind of this draft agenda. Go over it really fast. I'm looking through the list. I don't see anyone new on the call. Is that correct? Okay. So looking at the action items from the last call. So we're looking at pulling together a list of GitHub issues for people to look at to start contributing. Looking at the sources for share, I think, is that what that is? We did put out a survey for more use cases, and I have not looked at the data for that yet, so that may be something to follow up on. And draft data model, that is something that is in progress. But really, kind of based on some of the comments from last time, we were thinking that we could try to discuss what we think of as the minimum viable product so that everyone is kind of in agreement upon that for the work we're doing here. So myself, Jeff, Cam, and Ryan compiled our assumptions in this document last week. So it seems like it would be good to review really quickly here. I think I already have it open. Yes. So if you look at page 2 and then on 3, so at the very top of page 2, it goes from kind of the general to the more specific. So generally speaking, having a configurable editor for creating harvesting workflows with some predefined nodes there with Node-RED, a deployable server instance to take flows configured in the editor, to run them, persist them, collect the data to a backend data store. Sources, we're assuming the MVP is harvested from the highest priority sources, not necessarily 100% of the current sources in share yet. So like looking to, like as we add them, to add them in order of the ones that are highest priority. And then ability to replicate and share data between 2 instances of the share server. So I'll stop there. Or that should be 2 or more, really. But I guess two is like the minimum viable product. Yeah. Any questions or comments on this so far? I see some things coming through in the chat. Let's see here.
Hi. So I was wondering if all these tasks are that we can do it independently, because like for me, if I want to contribute, there are many discussions which I'm not part of, which you guys do regarding the model and the schema. So unless the model and the schema are done, is there any, or like while you are doing the schema part, is there any part which we can pick, and can we discuss some issues like that?
Yeah, so that's actually like a good thing that matches up with like one of our guesses on what we would need to talk about today, where we had like what do we need to know, or what like the barriers to contribute. So that is then, so one, you indicated one that we had already talked about is trying to get, like as it makes sense, to get others plugged into some of the side conversations that are happening. But yeah, so say that again. So like, what were the other things?
So my thing is, in the list of GitHub issues, can you point out some of the issues which we can pick up without being part of like the discussion which you guys have there, like which you can do it independently, basically?
Sure. Yeah, and I don't know that we actually have anything that is well defined enough yet to qualify. Let me pull up the link again really quick here. So the ones we have here are still pretty high level. For an existing, so this is something that is more of a kind of administrative task. So we're looking to have, or the proposal is to have the various repos as they are in GitHub spread out for the project. Like in order to be able to pull those all together at once, have those be NPM packages that could then be loaded in that manner. So that's what we started thinking about from kind of an installation process perspective. So if someone was to say build a server, like what would be the process for doing that? So that's what, and then also like if someone wants to have a client, like how would they actually install and run their client? Like what would be the various things they would do if they're assuming that there would be different options for how that would be built or configured.
So while this is under working, I wonder if it'd be a good idea for us to start looking at the legacy data. Well, not legacy data, data is currently being collected. So is there a path to think about moving the existing data collected to this platform? If there is, then we probably can do it in parallel to think about to get data out of the current ShareNoc file. Would that be a good idea?
Yeah, so I think it is a good idea to take a look at how the data exists today. So that, yeah, so that's that is a good task. So let's go ahead and create that now. And say initial search to get of existing data. New data model and tools are available.
So could Rick and Jeff help us to get access to those?
Yes, yes, we can do that. So yeah. To access. Okay, and I don't know if Cam, if you're starting to capture that in the notes. Not here.
I'll do that right now. I was just watching along.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Yes. Because it is assumed that, well, I think that is actually like one of the questions of how useful it will be to migrate the existing data or just to recreate it. So I think that will be either way. That is a task that would feed into that. It would be great to be able to take the data that we have and not have to reharvest that.
Some of the record might have been deleted or have been changed. So I think one value would be keep a historic snapshot of what we have.
Right. Sure. Okay. So I didn't hear any disagreement with the primary objectives. Did these sound right for the, I see nods. I'll try to scroll so I can see other nods. All right, so it sounds like yes. So then the rest of this was really starting to get into, okay, to actually accomplish those objectives, what would be the technical requirements to do that? So looking at or like the more granular things that would need to be done, harvesting, data collection, validation, having JSON schemas that then could be used to validate against as data is coming in. The GUI for share read, which exists in some form already, obviously. The raw storage, so thinking that initially, like MongoDB is one of the possible technologies there. I don't think that there has been like an absolute, this is what we're using decision. Is that correct, Jeff? Yes, no, it's okay. Yeah, so this is really one, just trying to get some ideas down to start to test these to see how well these things might work. And then kind of mapping, looking at the schemas and mapping file that starts the pipeline into raw storage. For the mapping, we're thinking about having some JSON templates that will define various methods, primitive methods that can be used to parse and take in data as it comes. So like, a great example is a name value, maybe one more composite value that has, surname, given name, middle name, et cetera, and we may want to parse that apart and map it to a particular structure. So, having methods to kind of to go to that, so we don't have to rewrite that every time, and have that just be something to say, okay, as it's bringing this in, apply this method and then spit out the appropriate type of data, right? So that's so thinking about how we're taking in all of these different values, like ideally, in many cases, it'll be just a value to value transfer, but not in every case. Let's see, enhance process data source. So one, thinking that there would be one raw data storage as it's coming in, but then also as it is processed, have that go to more, and this would be more the active data store, right? That would then feed into various tools, but wanting to maintain the raw data if that is of any value, as it's coming from various sources. So then there's some other things in here, looking at the sharing data between instances, just some various questions. Can someone ask for and retrieve data from me? Can someone update that data? I'm looking at my board since Jeff was actually here at Notre Dame yesterday, and we talked through a little bit of this. But in terms of some of the aspects, and Jeff, maybe you could talk about this a little bit more, but like there's various questions that the nodes could ask of each other. So saying like, can you give me certain records from archive, for example? And then there's certain things that we could do that says, well, also ask your peers what data they have. So like, so one, doing more of a direct node inquiry. So like if Virginia Tech sent the node sent a message to Notre Dame's node saying, what data do you have on this? Notre Dame could also send that out to other nodes as well as an inquiry. So those are some of the things that are just starting to be talked about. APIs, having some kind of API, obviously. And then kind of thinking about the MVP, that not just building the kind of the core infrastructure, but also looking to actually have a couple applied examples of using the data. So to make sure that we're driving towards at least a couple of those. So that's what we have so far as the MVP. How does this seem? Okay, I assume silence is acceptance. Okay. All right. So let me go back to the agenda to make sure we're staying on track here. So then with that, so we started talking about some of the issues as well, and we did go through that. So maybe that is a good jumping off point. Jeff talked about internode communication. Also wanted to mention, I know, David, you said that you had to leave at the top of the hour. Did you have anything that you wanted to touch upon before you had to head out?
Yeah, probably not. That is directly relevant to the agenda. No, I think I'm good.
Okay.
Rick, do you want to go back to that question of what people need to know to contribute and what areas of interest they have?
Yeah. So that would make sense to close the loop on that. That would be good.
Yeah. So just even independent of the list that you saw, a lot of the stuff we're pushing on a variety of areas just to get things kick-started. But obviously we would like more people involved, as this is a community project, and we'd like to, really foster that side of things. So what is it that you need from us to get involved? Where are the points that you'd like to get involved? What can you contribute? What areas do you think, even from stuff you've heard right now, do you think you potentially could contribute if you knew more about it? We heard a little bit of that earlier with transitioning some of the data, but for this new development, that's I think where we're most interested in these questions.
I would say I'd rather leave the architecting of the new product to you guys. Once the framework is there, we can contribute to harvesting bit by bit. That's the nitty-gritty implementation of that part. That's certainly something that we can contribute. But at this moment, I don't think you want too many chefs in the kitchen in terms of architecting. I would say architecting probably is better left with one team instead of too many. I'd rather we would be interested to know how you're architecting it, but we'd rather not stand in your way. Would that be a good idea? I wonder.
Yeah, that comment's appreciated, and I understand where you're coming from. But that does leave, this harvester side of things. For example, we think that Node-RED and what we're developing with ShareRed is going to be a useful environment and framework for harvesting. And so, one thing we could use some help with would be trying to write some harvesters, having other people other than us write harvesters, play with the framework. So that would be one area where then we could still be working on getting that framework built up, getting the pieces put together, and then
I think we can do that.
Yeah, so yes. I believe the main hurdle is the schema right now. That's the starting point for anything I want to pick up from the issues, I think. Even if it goes for API or the front end or say a harvester, knowing the schema is the starting point. So if we can have that as you can share with us what is the progress and is it done or not?
What we're doing is thinking about this a little differently than the past share work, and how we're thinking about this is this sort of I don't want to say objects of record, and I don't want to say, I don't want to put too much emphasis on the truth of these items, but harvesters, the raw data that comes from a harvester is interesting in many ways before it's mapped to another schema. And so, and what that allows is for some common discussion on what that entity should be. We can more strongly identify that and then access that data in a somewhat less dynamic way. And so what we've been thinking is we will generate a set of schemas in JSON schema format for each harvester. And so what that defines is sort of the truth from that harvester. And that gives us then a way to talk about that between groups independent of how you map that data to another schema. And
Okay.
so, for example, you can maybe Cam or Ryan can post in a link to a few of the harvesters we've written schemas for. And what this does is then allow for validation. So even ignoring any of the identifiability of that data, it allows us to validate the API to make sure the API is not changing while we collect more and more data and try to do this mapping. So you can think of these as validators if you want to ignore some of those other characteristics. And the link is now in the chat. And I encourage you to take a look at those repos and the files that are in there. It's early work, obviously. But if we do that, then if we write a harvester, what we're trying to really do is get as raw of data as possible into some format. And we'll be working on that very soon. Basically, right now, a good exercise would be, can we write Node-RED workflows that then can be validated against the schemas that you see here. And again, they are supposed to be very direct mappings to exactly what is in that data. And if we can do that and we enjoy that process, and that process seems like it's a useful way to work, then we could be doing the mapping exercise as the second step. And that's the piece I think you're referring to with the schema. And that part Rick is actively working on right now. Thinking about the schemas for some of these use cases, in particular the research data dashboard style work or research output dashboard. But until then, we still can harvest this raw data and maintain it in its raw format, which will have some benefits as we think about decentralizing storage and whatnot.
Okay, so I think what you're getting at is like you want to see as many harvesters as possible to then finally go for the schema. Like you want to see all the raw input format which will be available to you beforehand. Is that the crux of it?
Yeah, I mean, we don't need as many as possible, certainly, but having a few, especially written by other people, will help us really understand, is this, we're trying to do a few things with the harvesting. So if we're use case focused, which is the actual products that use the shared data, not everyone's going to be interested in the same harvesters. It won't make sense for one group to have thousands of harvesters that they actively maintain, and it's not sustainable. It's not. It doesn't make sense practically in many cases. But what we could have is several groups maintaining a few harvesters each, or many groups maintaining many harvesters each. And what that would mean is simply maintaining the schema and the way of getting that data. Now once that happens, so that the other side of this is, if we're thinking about many people being involved in this data collection effort, this harvesting, which is non-trivial, by the way, maintaining all of those harvesters at COS, it took a lot of just silly manual time fixing bugs as people's APIs changed and stuff. There was a lot of time involved that went into that was actually not on fun, novel work of using the data, but on just matching these things. And so if we can have the experts, the local experts, the people who really care about those harvesters keeping up with that, I think it'll be a more scalable approach. Now, we need to lower the barrier of entry then to writing harvesters if this is a vision that we want to see implemented. And we think that Node-RED offers that accessibility to writing these harvesters without being necessarily experts at coding and web scraping and APIs and all of this. And so thinking about that aspect of it, trying to really lower the barrier to entry, make that more inclusive, bring more diversity to that process. What are the components, for example, in Node-RED that we need to make it really easy to extract these things, to do this stuff? Well, we need, for example, an OAI harvester. We shouldn't have people just, parsing raw XML from an OAI feed. We should have an OAI harvester that takes in the sets of information you want and blacklist the ones that you don't, and does all of that parsing somewhat automatically. Now that would lower the barrier to entry to write an OAI harvester. We might need a regex node. We might need just a glob, so you can use wildcard formats. Maybe that's a little easier for most people than regular expressions. And some of those are already built by the Node-RED community. We have a lot of these accessible to us, but we need to know which ones we need more and which ones we would lower the barrier to entry to. And so having multiple people test this and try this, I think will give us an idea about how inclusive we can make this project. It would be great if people learning how to deal with APIs or learning how to write JavaScript or harvesters or scrapers could use this as a way to get started. And then we'd have contribution from a lot of different people, a lot of stakeholders, without the need to have then, this core set of developers actively maintaining every one of these harvesters. And if we think of the only really route of transformation being getting the raw data, then those people don't even need to worry about trying to do the mapping and transformation, which is a whole nother set of problems that we can work on making easier in this mapping layer. And so I think that's how we've tried to parse this, of thinking about what is the most direct way of getting contribution at that initial stage that allows one to focus really on the core aspect of that API, of that source API, and that is purely validating that the API is the same and getting that data into a raw format as easily as possible. And we think Node-RED offers some benefits there. So that's the sort of the core of the vision and the philosophy that we're trying to maintain of inclusivity and lowering barrier to entry and bringing more people into this area of research.
I understand. I think we can contribute on that part. I wonder, could we start some tickets? And
yeah, absolutely.
Starting from the tickets, and then we can pick and choose from there.
Yeah,
make a list of all the resources we want to harvest from.
Yep.
And get a priority list. So
yep.
That's when if there's a concrete task that we can take on, then we can pick it on one by one.
Yeah. What we'll do is Rick is writing a ticket for this as we speak. So
yep.
we will generate this list, but I think what would be good for people who want to test this side of things, yep. And again, the more people, the better. And I don't think you have to have JavaScript programming skills to do so. And if you don't, and if you do have to, we can also help you sort of build those skills. I think we should maybe do another call at some point just to have maybe Ryan and Cam walk through what they've done, and then we can maybe even do one of the harvesters as an exercise for people to see how we're thinking about this, and then you can get a feel for whether you think we're hitting the mark in terms of, is this really easier than writing code, or are we just fooling ourselves?
Okay, actually that call would be great if you can have that call.
Okay, so Rick, let's see if we can get that scheduled. So if you're interested in this side of things, why don't you put your name down somewhere here, and we will make sure to send out an email and get a call scheduled as soon as possible.
Okay, I'll put it in the notes. Okay.
Okay, very good. And really, I welcome anybody else here to do that. I think this would be a useful. Again, the more people, the better here, with a variety of backgrounds to try this and play with the system. If we're off on this flow style, this visual style programming, we should know about that before we commit too much to this as a method for creating harvesters. Maybe there's some other paradigms that we could look at before we do too much to commit to it.
I have one other question. I think in one of our previous meetings, someone put in a note saying there is a different project has already harvesting almost every repository from OpenCore. Can we use that as the source?
Yeah, so if there's data that's already being harvested into a useful format, we can certainly create harvesters for that. There were some issues, I believe, with OpenCore in the past, in that the license to that or the use of, not license, the use of that API was and I believe it was OpenCore. You shouldn't. Well, we're recording this to video, but I'll need to look into this. But I believe in the past this was a resource who required non-commercial use for the API, and that works with most use cases. But because we're combining that, some groups are going to be combining that with commercial data. There were just some ambiguities around the use of that API. So we would just need to make sure that if you get that data and you make it available, then you'd have to make it available under this was the issue. You'd have to make it under available. You have to make the data available under also a non-commercial use clause. And for many people, they wanted anybody to be able to use this data. And so if we introduce that data into the corpus, then we have to somehow mark that as only available for non-commercial use. And that hasn't in the past fit well with the objectives of the stakeholders. But given that we do want this to be used by many people and whatnot, but we can certainly look into that. We should look into if I'm even right, if Core was the group, and then if we can, yeah, we should harvest from anyone that has good data.
Okay, I see it. It's in our use case. Someone's put in UW guys put in an item called integrate unpaywall. That unpaywall thing has already harvesting huge amount of stuff from OpenCore. So I wonder if we can use that as the source.
Yeah, and unpaywall, I spoke to them about this issue in the past, and I'm not sure where they landed on it. I don't think they ever got confirmation that they could use it for non-commercial purposes. So I think they may have just ignored that clause, or maybe not ignored it, but maybe they believe there are reasons that it wasn't relevant. But I do want to respect their terms of use. If there are restrictions upon the data, I don't want to just violate that without having some way to pass that information on. But unpaywall was also trying to, I believe, harvest data without OpenCore because of this issue. So they may be harvesting their own data as an alternative to OpenCore. I think that was the plan, was to write harvesters that didn't use OpenCore because of this issue. So we would have to bring on the OpenPaywall folks to check, or someone to contact them. But yeah, we can certainly look at that as a source as well.
Is there a consideration in the implementation to sort out this licensing mass? I mean, it's very complicated issue. Just because data are there that's available that we can grab does not necessarily mean we can put the data as an output. So I wonder, do we set ourselves to deal with the licensing issue? We can possibly just ignore this whole thing. People use at their own risk.
Yeah, well, we certainly could take a more liberal perspective, and a lot of people have encouraged that in the past, given that they believe some of these things are not they can't be upheld in for any sort of legal consequences. We really do want to stay away from licensing metadata. Certainly, will set a bad precedent in the community. These data are facts, and they should be thought of that way. The problem is that, like if you would, and again, because I'm not positive, I won't use that as an example, but let's say I have some data that I make available under, so that my API you can only use for non-commercial purposes, for example. Well, so the data isn't technically licensed non-commercially, because you can't license facts. facts are facts, and they by definition cannot be licensed. But the use of my API, I could have non-commercial terms for that. Now, there's a question of whether that can be upheld in court, at least in U.S. jurisdictions. But just being respectful to the API, you may say, well, I want to respect the fact that those are the terms, and therefore I want to then pass those terms along. The use of this block of data, because I accessed it under those terms, should now be non-commercial. The license, really, they're facts, and so now that they're open. But are we respecting that original source's intention with the collection and really access to that data? No, not really. And so it gets very, very complicated.
That's what I'm asking. Yeah.
I think the best thing that we can do is try to, for the most part, if you plan to share these openly, collect data that is facts, that can be treated as facts and cannot be licensed, is available to anyone. Now, we can segregate some of that data and actually annotate it with different terms. So, for example, there are stakeholders in the community that want to bring in data from Scopus or Web of Science. Now, that data, again, it gets funny because these are facts that are being pulled from the API, but that would violate contracts of most of those groups. It would violate the agreements that you sign when you purchase the Scopus API to then share those freely. And so we may need then to either maintain that data as private so that no one can access it, or you may need to have some way to say, well, I know that Virginia Tech buys Scopus, and so they'll be whitelisted, but no one else can access this unless we can confirm that they have purchased the Scopus API. We can at least build a framework to allow for those things, but in terms of dealing with that, in terms of sharing, it'll be up to the nodes themselves to make the call of whether they want to share that freely or not. And I think that's going to be the part that we'll need to do a little bit of education on, but we'll allow for that in the framework for sure.
Okay.
It's very, very complicated. This open core one is specifically complicated if it is the one because of the structuring of the terms of use. We've tried to get in touch with them to ask these questions. We should look at Unpaywall's API because I believe they harvested their own data because of this explicitly. So that would be I think the thing to do.
Sorry, just to understand, do we mean core, C-O-R-E, or is there another thing, open core?
I think we mean C-O-A-R, right?
C-O-A-R, yes.
C-O-A-R, okay.
Yeah, I think it's just, I don't even know if it's open core. I think it might just be core. There's
a thing called core, which is partly funded by GIST, which is basically sort of an aggregator for open access.
That's not it. Yeah, I don't think that's it.
That's not it.
Well, is it C-O-A-R or C-O-R-E?
And then there is,
I think it's C-O-A-R.
We're talking about
there's open door.
Door, yeah, sorry, door, yes.
Which is, directory of open access repositories. Okay, sorry. Okay, yeah, that makes sense, yeah.
Yes. So too many OARs and OORs at this. So
yeah. Okay, good.
Let's clear this up while we're here so that no one thinks. So ignore everything we've said about core so far.
Open door, yes.
It's open door, open DOAR. Yes,
yeah.
That's
Okay.
right. The directory of open access repositories, core and core and open core are doing wonderful things. I'm sure. I have no clue about their commercial use or not. Open door is what we've been talking about.
Okay, all right. Because I mean, from working on OpenAIRE, I know OpenAIRE, I'm fairly certain OpenAIRE is sourcing data from Open Door.
Yep. I think for the most part, people have been ignoring this non-commercial thing, or just assuming that they are, because they're nonprofits, they are also non-commercial. But that's actually not sort of incorrect way to look at it, because we're passing this data on to other people. So we just need to look at let's just make this more general. With any data that we harvest, if you want to be harvesting that data from your machines, you need to do a few things. You need to look at if they do try to license the data. You need to look at the terms of use that they have. You need to look at whether they have a privacy policy and whether they have a robots.txt file. All three of these things are sort of critical to, well, four of these things are critical to understanding what you can and can't do with data. And so before anyone harvests anything, you should have a good understanding of those things. And those terms may include, for example, you can only hit this API 100 times per hour, or 1 time per hour, or 1 time per day. You can only make so many requests. And so you have to, legally, you don't have to, because some of these things have not been tried and whatnot, and we don't know if there's legal consequences or not. But out of respect for that source, and probably out of respect for your lawyers on campus and whatnot, you should probably think about those things before you make that call. Now, most of these groups, they want you to use their data. They want you to use their APIs. There's not going to be any problems whatsoever. But those are the things you should take a look at before harvesting. And I can help you understand some of those things. Obviously, I'm not a lawyer. You need to talk to your lawyers if you're going to be doing any of this stuff. But I can at least tell you where to look to find this stuff. Most of the groups, they're fine. And you can always email the group as well and ask for specific access for your use case. So that's the other thing, that even if you find an ambiguous clause, you can email. We had a problem getting a hold of anybody at Open Door back at COS. And I think Open Paywall or Unpaywall had some issues getting in touch with someone. So we may just need to try again if we do want to use Open Door, DOAR. It looks like they've also released a version 2, which may not have this non-commercial clause in it. So okay. Put your name down if you want to be part of a harvesting call, and we can do at least the technical side of that. We can choose some benign repositories to draw from, and then we can deal with some of these issues later on. And maybe that can be something we try to get a group together to document a how-to guide or a recommended practices, best practices when it comes to harvesting data.
Okay. So I am wondering if we should move the internet communication to a future call. Just because it feels like we had a good.
Absolutely, I think we can focus on this initial step of harvesting, get people into that pipeline, and then we can talk about that at another call.
Okay. But yeah, but just to kind of review, I think there was at least one action item that's not in the list yet. Let's see here. Let me go to because I was starting to create some of the GitHub issues there. Okay, so one is we have this generating list of desired harvesters to feed into those. So like, what are the, make this more specific, desired high priority harvesters. Oh, come on now. What? I have to, things making me want to comment? Oh, it's up here. There we go.
So if you want to dig into some of the licensing issue to see the complexity, I'm going to link a few things here with Open Door as an example. now that we've confirmed that that one is. So if you look at that link, you'll see explicitly that they license, which is a problem to begin with, I think, from a metadata standpoint, for reuse under a Creative Commons non-commercial share-alike attribution license, which the attribution aspect is actually also problematic when it comes to thinking about machine learning, AI, aggregate use cases where if you use that information to, say, generate a training set that you then did something with, you'd have to then find a way to attribute every piece of data that you used. And then, but if you are using stochastic algorithms or a very large corpus of data, that attribution can actually be impossible or practically very, very difficult. So there's some issues just there to begin with. Now that page links to version 2, and the version 2 API page says nothing about terms of use. So that I see as we're looking. So hopefully they've moved on to a more facts-based use of their data. But this is where things got very complex, and we had many discussions about licensing and the legal side of metadata and whatnot.
Okay, sorry, just to jump in, just because obviously this is a JISC service, if you need, and I'm from JISC, even though I'm not overly familiar with OpenDoor, but obviously I can help sort of facilitate finding the right kind of people.
That would be excellent. And I didn't know, I guess I wasn't, in the past, I didn't know that it was a JISC service.
It's not been heavily branded. Yeah.
Now it's very clear in the version 2 that it's JISC, and so I would have emailed different people in the past when I didn't get a response. But yeah, Leo, we might need to get in touch then and have you put us in contact with someone in the project. That would be good.
Yeah, and I'm happy to help with that, obviously.
Actually, why don't we do that? OpenDoor has always been one that we thought would be highly useful. And because there was that more conservative license around the data, and now there's not, I think it'd be smart for us to go ahead and confirm what the term is used for. And so if you can find someone that would know or can talk to us about this, that would probably be a good thing just to go ahead and do.
Yep. Okay.
Okay.
Right. I'll follow up with that and CC you, and then.
Yeah, that'd be great. You have my email address. Why don't we? Let me find the doc. I'll drop or Cam or Ryan, if you have the doc open, put my email in next to. Oh, here we go. I think I've got it. So at the top, I'll put it in there. All right. Okay. Very good. Thanks, Leo. I appreciate that.
That's good. You're welcome.
Okay. So, yeah, here's the more complete notes. See, yeah. So thinking about what's left to tie up for this call. So we've got one scheduling the call to walk through the harvester, and like just quick question, like when should we target? You think maybe, well, let's see, we could try to add one call in between this one and the next one, or we could try to shoot for more like a week from now. Any opinions there?
Let's do a doodle poll when you have the list of names.
Okay.
Yeah. Next week, that should be fine, but it's a specific time that might have issues. Students have their class times that cannot be shifted.
Okay, that works. Okay. Yeah, but we'll look like sometime within the next 2 weeks, I would say. Or 2 weeks out from now, like somewhere within that time frame. Let's see, anything else for today? feel like we're edging closer and closer to expanding the contributor pool. All right. Yeah, so then kind of I think in preparation for that call, we'll be trying to pull together all the relevant information, examples, etc. for that.
So I wonder, it would be a good idea to record that call too, so that for people who cannot join the call, they can view the videos later.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep, sounds good.
Okay.
All right. Well, I think, is there anything else for today?
I think that's it.
Okay. Well, let's break a few minutes early then.
Very good. Thanks all. Looking forward to
Thank you.
future conversations here.
Thank you.
All right. And I assume is that Abram from COS that's also on the call there?
Yeah, hi, sorry, I missed the roll call.
No problem.
Yeah, so I'm just kind of here because I'm curious about Share, and I'm still maintaining, I'm now the only maintainer of Share V2 here at COS, so I'm curious about the arc and direction of the project in the future.
Perfect.
Well, good. Thanks for getting on the call, Abram.
All right.
Perfect. Thanks all.
Bye.
Thank you all. Bye.
Talk to you guys later.